So while you have the memory of observing with your eyes and of touching and noticing things with your hands and of having had somebody making observations with eyes and hands about you, it might be interesting to notice which of those seems to inform how you pay attention to yourself now. So just as you lie there on your back, can you begin to sense which is the widest part of you? Does it feel as though it's your shoulders or the sides of your pelvis? And how do you check that? Do you somehow sense it from the inside? Do you imagine being on the outside and looking, or holding your hands to see which of those two parts takes them further apart? And then if you were to scan through your body and sense which bone is the longest. Some of you have studied anatomy and you may have an answer in your head. But what's more interesting is which bone feels the longest. And again, notice, do you sense that, the distance between its two ends? Or do you imagine yourself somehow looking down and comparing the different parts of your body? And then maybe you could imagine that suspended on the ceiling is one of those parachute silks that's going to be taut enough that it will stay completely flat, and it's going to gently float down. Could you guess which bit of you it's going to touch first? For some people, it will be your nose. Some may be your forehead. Some maybe it's your toes. Which bit of you is highest away from the floor? And then if you think about your face and sort of vaguely divide it into three sections, the section that has your forehead, the section that has your nose, and the section that has your mouth and your chin, which one of those is the largest? And once again, some of you maybe have had some training in drawing or in looking at how faces are organised, and you might have a theoretical idea. But in your own sensation, which bit feels the biggest? And then continuing to think about your head, which bit's the widest? Is it the bit that has your forehead? Is it the bit that has your ears? Maybe it even feels as though the part that has your jaw takes up more space in your self-image. And then thinking about the spaces that you've just been exploring. What sort of spaces are there under your right arm or around your right arm? Between your armpit and your elbow? Is that a clear contact? And then if you think about tracing the shape, think about the space between the side of your chest and your upper arm. Would you be able to draw that space on a piece of paper? If you think about following your arm down towards the wrist, are there spaces underneath it? And what's the shape of the space between the side of your ribs or your pelvis and your lower arm? And so if you imagine that you had a brush and you could trace out that shape, the gap between your arm and the side of your body, what does it look like? Could you paint it onto a piece of paper somewhere? And can you remember the sensation of somebody's hand tracing that shape on you? Is that how your brush feels, or does your brush have a different quality to it as it traces out that shape? And then taking your brush to the top of your head, can you begin to trace down the right side of your head? So you'd feel the side of the brush perhaps going around, down by your temple, over your ear, to the side of your neck, down to your shoulder and around along the outside of your arm, down to whichever finger is on the outside at the moment. So depending on whether your hand is facing up or facing down, some of you it'll be the little finger, some of you it'll be the thumb. Would you be able to draw that line on a piece of paper? And if you think about your right hand, how it's lying on the floor and the distances between your fingers. So which fingers are closer together? Is there any distance between them? If so, how much? Or are they touching so closely there's no space at all? Are there some fingers that have a big distance between them? And can you sense how far that is? And then coming over to the left side and comparing that. Would you start with the space between your arm and your body? Or would you start tracing down the outside? And so if you were to draw the shape of the space between your left arm and your left side and compare it with the shape of the space between your right arm and your right side, how are they different? And can you notice your process for gathering that information? Is it all in your visual imagination, or are you shifting between some kind of kinesthetic sensing of the distances and then maybe making an imaginary drawing on a piece of paper or on the whiteboard? How can you compare those two senses of shape? How would you tell if your elbows are equal distances from their relative sides? And did you take your paintbrush from the top of your head down the left side, past your left ear, around the angle of your chin into your neck? Sorry, not your chin, your jaw. Around your shoulder, down your arm. What do you notice about the distances between the fingers on your left hand? Can you find the fingers that are closest together? The ones that are furthest apart? And is that the same pattern as you have with your right hand? Now let's come back to your head again, thinking of those three parts of your face. Which one of them's nearest to the floor? How do you sense the distance of the upper surface of your face away from the floor underneath it? Does it feel as though your chin is closer to the floor, your cheekbones, or your forehead? Is there a dip at the bridge of your nose, perhaps, that is even closer to the floor? And then if you think about your right ear, do you have any sense of the shape of it? Think about the meaty bit. You probably have some sense it's there, but can you actually recognize whether or not you remembered to put your ears on this morning? And then if you were to sense the difference between your ear and the right corner of your right ear and the right corner of your eye, where would you find a reference? And when you have a place on your ear that you're sensing, can you draw another line to the corner of your mouth? So which is closer? The ear to the corner of your eye, or the ear to the corner of your mouth? And then check on the left side. Can you find your left ear? How do you check in with that? And then find the imaginary line between your left ear and the corner of your left eye. And then make the line between the corner of your mouth on the left side and your ear. And compare the lengths of those two lines. And can you tell which ear is closer to the floor? How would you do that? Is there some sensation that you can find that you can check in with? Do you imagine standing to the side of yourself and looking? Do you imagine somebody else bringing their hand or their fingers and measuring for you? And those of you who were alive in the 70s, do you remember the fashionable chokers that women wore around their necks, often a velvet ribbon? Think about the part of the neck that they went round. It was usually the narrowest part. Can you sense where that would be on you? If you tied a ribbon around your neck, where would it sit? So once you have a sense of where the narrowest part is, can you get a sense of what the actual size is? How big is that part of your neck? Is it something that you could wrap your fingers around? Is it something that's similar to another part of your body? And can you actually somehow take that reference of that thinnest part of your neck and move it around your body and find somewhere that's the same diameter? Is it somewhere around your waist, perhaps? Perhaps not. Maybe somewhere in your arm or your leg. According to Dr. Feldenkrais, in the international contest for beauty in bodies, the thickness of the neck is equal to the thickest part of the calf. Is that the part that you found? Or if you compare those two parts in yourself, does that image make any sense at all? And then if you think about some lengths from the tip of your shoulder to the tip of your longest finger, try the left arm and then the right arm. Do they feel as though they're the same length? Or does it feel as though one of them's a little longer or a little shorter than the other? And then if you think about your legs, from the place where you would put your hands on your hips, those lumpy bits, down to your heels, is that distance more or less than the distance you just checked on your arms? Are your legs the same length? I'm sure some of you have been told that they're not. But what's your sensation? Okay, and then leave your concentration and attention for a moment and come up to sitting. Could you put your left foot in the fold of your right arm? Your left foot into the fold of your right arm. Now, there's lots of ways of interpreting that instruction. And I can see a whole variety of interpretations. Can you compare the length of your foot with your forearm? Is there any way that you could kind of stand your foot on your forearm, or press the heel into the elbow and have the toes go along your arm? What do you discover? It's different? It's the same. Isn't that strange? Similar? Now, those of you, again, who were around perhaps back in the 60s might remember that we used to measure things in terms of feet. Now, most of us don't have a foot that was equivalent to the standard foot of measurement, but it's vaguely similar. In ancient times, in biblical times, we read that things were measured in terms of the length of the forearm, the cubit, or what does he call it? The amma. And that's a tradition in many cultures, to use parts of the body for measuring things. Do some of you have bits of your body that you carry around as portable rulers? That's a meter from your nose to your fingertip. What else do you measure according to body? Is how far? 15 centimeters, point a finger to thumb. For me, the length of my middle finger is 4 inches. Yep. Okay, horse's height is measured in hands, which is the width of your fist. 2 fingers of whiskey, there you go. Okay. Lie down again. Okay, there's a long tradition of using parts of ourselves, things that are with us all the time, easily accessible, to measure the world around us. Okay, so as you lie there now and you compare the width of your shoulders to the distance between your heels, is it bigger or smaller? Obviously, it depends how you've organized your legs. So if you If you took a compass and, as in one that you draw a circle with, not one that you find direction with, and you put one side of it, don't want it to be too pointy because it's going in your navel, but the still part is going to be in your navel, and you're going to draw a circle. Can you draw a circle that includes your shoulders? So as you trace that circle around that touches your shoulders, what else falls on the circumference of that circle? Where does it pass through below your navel? Does it capture your kneecaps? Or does it pass across your legs in some other place? If you stretch your arms out to the side, with your palms facing towards the ceiling, okay, and make another circle with your navel as the center, that now has a circumference that your fingertips touch. Where would you need to place your feet so that they fall on the same circle? Some of you thinking of Leonardo's drawing of Vitruvian Man. Leonardo gave us some interesting ideas about proportions of the human body and what things fall on similar circles. If you were to stand up with your feet in this position, could you? The suggestion is that the place at which your feet would touch the circle that your fingertips touch is the widest distance of your feet where you could comfortably stand. So does that change how you would organize yourself? Can you get that sense and still have the sensation that the circle touches your heels and your fingertips? And then if you bring your feet together, can you feel where the circle would go? Would your feet be inside the circle or outside the circle? And by how much? So still in sensation, coming back to your hands, you probably know which is your longest finger, but do you know which is your second longest? And is it the same on your left hand and your right hand? Have a look and see. Did you know that? These things that we've carried around with us for all these years, we've probably looked at them many times each day. Did you guess? Did you sense? Did you bring an image to your mind's eye? If you were to draw diagonal lines from one shoulder to the opposite hip, and likewise on the other side, have a sense of where those two lines would cross. Sorry, what was that? Shoulder to hip. You're freaking out about the fingers, yeah. Who would have thought? Okay, so you've now got your diagonal lines. Do you have a sense that they cross on a line that would pass down through the center of your face and your body? We talked about that center line earlier today. Or is the cross a little bit to one side or the other? Is it where you'd wear a belt, or is it somewhere higher or lower? And then can you draw another imaginary line from your left elbow to your left knee? So you might like to, those of you who've still got your arms way out to the side, let them come a little closer into your body. And draw another line from your right elbow to your right knee. Are they parallel to that center line? Are they parallel to the side of your body? Well, what sort of angle do you sense? How far from your sides are those two lines? And is it possible to move your arms and your legs to make those lines parallel to that central axis of your body? And come back to your hands again. Think about the spread of your hand between your thumb and your little finger. Those of you who play the piano might be familiar with that distance. For some people, it's an octave. For some people, it's more than that. Getting that sense of the distance between your thumb and your little finger, again in your imagination, can you take that around yourself and find another part that matches that length? Is there a part of your body that's that same length as the span of your hand or the octave on the piano? Maybe you could think back to when you were sensing your partner in the previous activity, or when somebody was sensing the different parts of you. Maybe you float up and look down at the span of your hand and look at your body. If you were to think of your face from the tip of your chin to your hairline, would that be the span of your hand? Can you roll over onto your tummy? Rest your forehead in your hands. And can you organise your legs so that the tips of your toes, that'll be your big toes, will be at the same width as your elbows? Now, which is the highest point from the floor? Can you sense that? Do you imagine the parachute floating down, noticing where it touches? Do you imagine stepping out to the side of yourself and looking across? It's at the back of your head, it's at your heels, shoulder blades, buttocks. And then bring your hands down by your sides with the palms facing upwards. And let your thumbs just come in and touch the sides of your legs. See if you can sense whether the distance between your toes is equal to the distance between your shoulders. And then if you're to bend your knees so that your feet come up into the air, what's happened to the distance between your heels? Are your heels the same distance they were apart when they were on the floor? Are they closer together than your shoulders or further apart than your shoulders? And then if you think of the distance between your wrists, let your legs come down, sorry. Think about the distance between your wrists and your heels. Get a sense of how far that is. Is that longer or shorter than the distance between the base of your skull? Can you remember yesterday we talked about where that is, where the neck stops and the head starts, right up in the back there, all the way down to your anus. So you're comparing that length down your back with the length of your legs. You have a sense of where your sit bones are. It's easy to find them when you're sitting on a firm surface. When you're lying on your front, how do you sense where they are? Do you remember anything from yesterday of thinking about where the hip joints were that gives you a clue in your mind's eye where they might be? Or can you somehow sense where they are now or remember where they usually are when you sit on something? Do you have a sense that they're the same width as your knees or your heels? Or the two sides of your head? And come back onto your back again. Just organize yourself to lie comfortably. And just notice what effect that's had on your sense of self. What are you aware of now? Are there particular lengths or widths or angles or depths? Are there particular relationships between things that kind of stand out in your memory? And then if you go beyond what was kind of in the top of your mind that stood out immediately, can you go back a layer and think of something else that you explored that might have been interesting? If you remember back through some of the parts that you measured or sensed, some of the lines that you drew, can you connect some bits together that perhaps you wouldn't normally think of as being in relationship to each other? And then if you think about 5 lines of your body, 2 lines of your legs, the lines of your arms, and the line of your spine, and you overlay that map onto the images that you've just been drawing and playing with, what do you notice about the relationship between those two? Does it give you a framework around which to draw the rest of you? Or do the lines that you've been drawing on the floor or on the wall as you sensed yourself give you a clearer sense of your shape, your form, the way you lie on the floor? And then in several lessons we've done recently, Stephanie's reminded you that we've been practicing awareness through movement. But today we practiced awareness through lying still. And yet you may have a sense that something's changed. Maybe something about the tonus in certain parts of you. Maybe something about the way that you're lying on the floor now. Maybe something about the orientation of your face or your feet, your hands. And then in a moment, I'll invite you to find your way up to standing. And again, to notice, what do you sense? What widths, what relationships, what depths stand out to you as you change your position? And then as you start to walk, which bits of you feel most prominent? Which sticks out more in the front or more in the back? Which bits of you are wider? Okay, and then when you're ready, find your way up. Take a moment to sense yourself in standing. We often sense contact with the floor, but if there was a board or a wall in front of you or behind you, what sort of contact would you make with that? And in your sensation at the moment, does that feel similar or different to when you were lying on your back or lying on your front? Okay, and then opening your eyes just enough to keep you safe. Walk a little bit, but keep that internal sensing to notice which parts of you lead, which parts follow, how do the widths change. What effect has this had on your self-image? And we know we act in accordance with our self-image. So how would this image of you go to lunch? Come back 1:30. 1:30? Hour and a